Through the Third Eye. Book 1 of the Third Eye Trilogy. Chapter 10, Remembering or Not. The next morning, Clay, Shali, and Tommy settled into the regression suite to get started on the third session. Clay warmed up the equipment and tested the audio recorder. They were ready to begin.
This is Shali Faisal. It is 8:16 a.m. in Carmarthen, Wales on the 29th of February. This is the third regression session on Thomas Evans, also known as Tommy, subject 𝐂𝐇𝐈𝐒, 𝐿𝐒 3254, suspected solar's ID number TP884546. Clay Barton is performing the regression of the subject. I am assisting and will be monitoring and managing the control board. The objective of this session is regression and transition to the LBL phase for interaction with the subject's soul or guide. The subject is very cooperative. 2 previous regressions were successful in connecting directly to several lives. Subject understands possible consequences from performing the regression but has shown no signs of adverse impact, nor has he retained any memories of the regressions.
Tommy immediately went into a deep trance. Clay moved into the regression scripts.
You are now in the Hall of Doors. See the glowing light at the end of the hallway. That doorway leads to a world where your soul goes between lives, a place between your incarnated lives. Go through that doorway. Are you there yet?
I sure am, chump.
Shali and Clay looked at each other and smiled. Clay continued.
Go through the door now. You will enter a very large open room that should have many rows of bookshelves, as far as you can see. In the center of the room is a large reading table.
Bloody hell. Will ya look at that? It's the old library at the university in Aberystwyth. Fantastic. Look at the old bookcases. The ladders go up the side to the high shelves. Look how long those aisles are. They go on forever, gorgeous dark wooden bookcases. And the staircases at the end.
Tommy was so talkative, Clay had to cut him short to keep the regression on track.
Is there anyone else in the library?
Holy Mary, Mother of Christ, what the hell is that? What kind of shit is this? You never said anything about ghosts, for Christ's sake.
Shali giggled at Tommy's blunt, humorous statements, even in a deep hypnotic trance. Holding back a laugh, Clay clarified for Tommy.
This is not a ghost. This is your guide, the mentor of your soul. It is an older soul who you trust and cherish. This guide helps you in the time between lives and when you are living in person. Do you understand?
Squits. Of course I understand. I've known him forever. Can be such a fuddy-duddy at times, and gets me goat if I don't do it right. But I have to admit, he is good to me. Helps me improve. You know, if I don't get it right, I get to do it again.
Ask the guide to review your past lives in the Akashic records from the library.
Tommy paused, then blurted out.
Okay, we're going to town now.
Ask the guide if he will speak to us directly about your previous lives.
There was a long pause at this question. Clay waited for a response. Tommy finally responded in a low, slow, crisp voice. He had a very different tone and demeanor.
This soul is a wise one. Many good lives. Experienced. Even so, there are more lessons to learn.
Tommy's jovial, joking mannerisms were nowhere to be heard. Clay looked at Shali with a glowing smile and a nod of success. She quietly mimed to Clay.
We got the guide. The last 2 days of frolicking with Tommy must have helped.
Clay said to Tommy and the guide.
Please review the lives of this soul, starting about 4,000 years before the present time. In particular, review lives that made significant contribution to the society in which they live.
After a moment, the guide spontaneously started to speak.
Yismael, in 1726 BC, comes to the life. This life was difficult. Rejection was the challenge, and he did not do well. His brother Isaac was jealous and suspicious of him. They fought often. The father, Ibrahim, treated this life with criticism and rejection.
Tommy slowly shook his head side to side.
This soul did not do well. Hate and spite filled his mind, despite his outward respect for his father. He will repeat the lesson in a future life. After he left this life, society worshipped him for redemption that he never demonstrated when the life was lived. The people did not see the truth of this life, but created images of what was desired to be believed.
Clay leaned over to Shali.
Hey, this pretty much confirms that he is Ishmael, the son of Abraham. The Muslims might be upset with this. Ishmael is one of their prophets and he did not do well. He failed his rejection test and had to take it again in another life, kinda like summer school.
Interestingly,
She whispered back.
Abraham's family was just as dysfunctional as any family today. They were certainly not the beaver cleavers, as the Bible would have you believe. They had all the quirks of any other family anywhere in history.
Clay nodded, and then moved the guide forward to the next life. The guide continued.
Miriam, 1400 BC, sister of Moses and Aaron. All are notable in future societies. Lessons of rejection, jealousy, and selfishness were corrected from previous lives. Her love for her brother Moses was selfless even as a child. This soul met that challenge but failed the challenge of prejudice. Her brother Moses married a woman from Sudan with very black skin. As Miriam, this soul would not accept the brother's wife because of her skin color. She did not make the correction before leaving the body. A correction had to be made in a future life.
Shali chuckled and quietly commented to Clay.
You watch. Tommy's soul is going to end up as a black slave in 1840, Charleston, South Carolina. A little karma.
Clay mimed a laugh and responded.
Yeah, I don't doubt that a bit. He deserved an attitude adjustment.
Tommy's guide continued for 10 minutes, reviewing Miriam's tumultuous life experiences with Moses, Aaron, and their families. Clay whispered to Shali.
Is this cool or what? There are references to these events in the Bible, Torah, and Quran, but now we get it firsthand, like a videotape review of a football game.
Clay shook his head and added,
Damn, I wish we could bring this public, but nobody would believe it anyway.
She nodded and laughed quietly.
With the guide here, I picture this ghost-like figure in a purple bathrobe, sitting at a table with our plump Tommy sipping a beer, eating peanuts and flipping through a giant tablet video book.
Yeah.
The guide continued unprompted.
There are many lives for this soul in the next 1,000 years. These lives are not historically prominent as you asked, but many lessons were learned.
Clay asked,
What is the next life of this soul that had a significant influence on human society?
Ptolemy Soter, 367 BC. Some later societies called this life the Savior.
As the guide described the good and bad side of Tommy's soul as Ptolemy, Clay thought back to Tommy's uncensored description of this same life 2 days earlier. He glanced across to Shali, who looked up with a smile. She was also thinking of Tommy's description of earthy frolics with whores, burning down Persepolis, and collecting the origins of the Alexandrian library. As if on autopilot, the guide continued to the next life.
Philo Judaeus, 20 BC, Alexandria, Egypt. This soul learned well and demonstrated good correction in this life. This soul learned that the principles of advanced goodness are framed in practice, example, and teaching. Those called Christians built the foundation of their philosophy based on his leadership, but this life was not recognized as such. That group chose to worship the icon of a martyr, executed before this life of Judaeus was complete.
After hearing that commentary, Shali whispered to Clay.
It seems odd for this guy to make a comment like this about Jesus Christ. Assuming, of course, that's who he meant by the executed martyr.
Yeah, I also figured JC was probably the martyr. Let me probe that more.
He turned back to Tommy's guide before he could continue.
Tell me more about this martyr. Did this soul, as Philo, ever meet with this martyr? Did they know each other, or know of each other? Was the martyr known by the name of Jesus?
There was a pause of nearly 5 seconds. Shali gave Tommy a 3-second micro-pulse shot to the third eye, and his head pushed back into the pillow. However, the guide ignored the question, and continued a spiel from the next significant life in the Akashic records. Clay looked at Shali and shrugged his shoulders.
Plotinus, 207 AD Rome. A wise soul in this life. Good intentions. He understood the reality of human life, but failed to convey his true ideals, and thus created confusion among many groups. These groups then followed divergent paths. The consequences of this failure resulted in disparate organizations who interpreted his teachings in different ways. A correction is to be made in a future life.
Clay's forehead wrinkled with confusion. He leaned to Shali and said,
This is pretty deep stuff. Usually guides describe simple, basic human characteristics, such as fairness, kindness, generosity, or jealousy. But this guide is a tough one. Remember Tommy's comment when he first saw the guide in the library? He said something like he was a hard ass.
Shali replied,
I know what you mean. This guide seems to demand an inordinate level of achievement from those souls under its mentorship.
As the guide droned on about the life of Plotinus, Clay continued his side discussion with Shali.
When I looked up Plotinus on the internet last night, I was bowled over. Plotinus was Greek but spent much of his adult life in Alexandria, India, Persia, and Italy. He made a vast array of metaphysical writings, which evidently heavily influenced Christian, Jewish, Islamic, Gnostic, and pagan religions. He carved himself a notch in history, basing his teachings and philosophies on Plato. His concept of the One pressed many religious dogmas to a single God concept.
But he left a lot of room for debate.
Shali interrupted. She pointed at her laptop screen.
It says here that Plotinus was the first philosopher to explicitly push the idea that true human happiness was independent of the physical world.
Understood. So these religions must have picked up on some of his philosophies.
It also says that he was a student and colleague of Ammonius Saccas for over 10 years in Alexandria, just like he told us the other day. You always ask about Ammonius at the end of the regressions. What's the connection here?
I kept running across Ammonius whenever I get a connection to secret writings. Let's see what the guide says about Ammonius.
Clay interrupted the guide.
Was this soul, as Plotinus, a student of a person called Ammonius Saccas in Alexandria?
Yes, this is so.
Tell us about this Ammonius Saccas. Is this soul living in a person at the present time?
Clay beckoned Shali for a micro-pulse shot to the third eye. However, after 3 attempts, then waiting, asking, and pulsing again, the guide gave no response. Clay leaned to Shali and said,
What a prude.
Give him a break, Clay. You've got Plotinus and you're asking about Ammonius, a different soul altogether. It's like you are asking the guide to go find another book of the Akashic shelf.
Suddenly, the guide continued to the next life.
Proclus, 409 AD, raised in Istanbul, lived in Athens. Correction achieved from shortcomings in previous life as Plotinus. Became prosperous but generously shared the wealth to help others. Good correction. Continued to develop and teach truth and realities to others. The soul attempted to change the core philosophies of Christians to correct their path. He failed, and they continued down a path of deceit to followers.
While the guide continued, Clay looked at Shali.
This guide is awful opinionated. What is this about? Christians deceived their followers.
I don't know. He seems harsh, almost cynical.
Agreed. If this guide is one of the mentors to this soul pod, they are probably all a bunch of overachievers. In the tens of thousands of regressions from the research studies, I've never seen souls with so many prominent lives. And here we have 2 in a row, both with dozens of highly successful and famous past lives.
Shali smiled.
I can't wait to see what our next target, the 𝐂𝐁𝐻 Indian in Panama, has to offer, assuming of course she's in the same pod and has the same guides.
Yeah. But even with all the pressure from the guides to be super achievers, we haven't come across one suicide.
Shali smirked and facetiously asked.
Yeah, you mean like all the high schools in Asia where there is so much pressure to achieve, the kids kill themselves?
Clay nodded. The guide assertively continued to the next life, without any prompting.
Dolpopa Sherab Gyaltsen, 1292 AD, Nepal and Tibet. Known as Dolpa Buddha.
This perked up both Clay and Shali. They stopped their side-chatting and listened to the guide's oratory.
This soul achieved the highest levels of accomplishment while incarnated in this life. Guides and elders communicated openly with the soul while in the body. This life authored numerous documents that communicated messages and philosophies of life. Truth and knowledge was revealed to this Buddha to teach to others.
Shali whispered to Clay.
This guide is a non-stop rambler. Must have had influence on Tommy because you can't hardly shut either one of them up. This guy seems like he's like on autopilot.
Clay smiled at her comment and then turned to interrupt Tommy's guide.
What did the guides and elders tell this soul as Dolpopa? Did they give special knowledge to this Buddha? Did this knowledge later become known as secrets?
No response came from the guide, despite several shots of micro-pulse to the third eye. Clay looked to Shali and said,
This is all interesting, but we're not getting ahead. He hasn't turned over any information about any hidden writings. We're up to 1300 AD already, and on the first 2 regression days, we did not see any significant lives after this point. I'm going to cut him off and get to the closing scripts on the secrets. Tommy's soul may have been the founding librarian at Alexandria, but he surely wasn't the last one. I think the last librarian is living down in Panama as a 𝐂𝐁𝐻 Indian.
Clay walked Tommy through the final scripts, directly asking the guide for information on the actual location of any hidden or lost secrets. They got nothing. No locations, no referrals, no pointers. The session finally wrapped up. Disappointment showed on the 2 regressors' faces as they tore down the equipment and packed the cases. Remembering or not. On the last night in Wales, all 3 of them sat together in a pub, sipping on pints of lager and lime.
Well, my little mutts, did you find what Yell was looking for? 'Cause I'll tell you that I sure don't remember shit.
Shali looked at Clay to make the first move. Clay took a slow sip of his lager and lime, savoring the sharp but tangy sweet taste. He looked up to Tommy with a smile and said,
We didn't find what we were looking for. Your soul is somehow connected to our search, but we don't know exactly how yet. You sure had some interesting lives, though. There was one life as a very prominent Roman Egyptian scholar who had an uncontrollable libido for women left behind by their Roman legionnaire husbands. That guy was banging on absolutely every willing woman he could find. You described one mother-daughter ménage à trois, and all kinds of other sexual trysts. I'm telling you, we couldn't stop laughing.
Clay went on to describe some more of Tommy's past life exploits, but with a bit of creative exaggeration. Tommy belly laughed throughout Clay's oratory, and at one point almost fell out of his chair. Then he said,
I still think your regression stuff is horse shit, but if not, I think you're right about my past sexual conquests. Let me tell you about the time I hooked up with Melanie Jones, up the road here.
Clay and Shali laughed as Tommy described his sexual conquests in his present incarnation. 2 hours later, after one too many loggers, Clay promised he'd come back someday to perform a special regression using PLR Protocol 73, which, unlike the Protocol 75, would allow Tommy to remember everything in his past lives as if he had lived them yesterday.
Now, if you do that, am I going to remember Cletus getting gutted in that field, again by them damn barbarians?
Silence immediately filled the air, as Clay and Shali looked at each other with blank stares. Clay turned back to Tommy.
Are you saying you remember Cletus?
I remember everything about his life, including every damn time I stubbed my toe.
Do you remember any other lives?
Nope. Nothing on any other lives. But I remember. No, I felt that goddamn sword slice through my guts on that beautiful summer afternoon in the wheat field.
Clay and Shali looked at each other again. Nothing more was said. End of chapter 10.